The $1 billion revenge, how a pregnant woman exposed a billionaire's Sheikh darkest secret epic story. Welcome, beautiful souls, to your own channel, Mr. Peter Stories. I'm so excited to have you here. I know you've been eagerly waiting for my story, and I can't wait to share it with you. If my story touched your heart, please let me know by rating it honestly. Your feedback means the world to me. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe and join this incredible journey with us. Your love and support make everything possible. Thank you for being part of this amazing family. The autumn wind danced through the historic corridors of the University of Colorado Boulder, carrying with it the sweet scent of fallen leaves and the whispered promises of change. Greer Waverly stood behind the counter of the campus cafe, her fingers absently tracing the worn edges of her textbook as she tried to squeeze in a few moments of study between customers. At 18, she carried herself with a quiet dignity that belied her youth, her honey-gold hair caught up in a messy bun that somehow made her look even more ethereal in the afternoon light streaming through the cafe's wide windows. The cafe, nestled in the heart of the campus, was her sanctuary, a place where she could both earn her keep and observe the tapestry of university life unfolding before her. The walls, adorned with vintage photographs of the campus through the decades, seemed to hold countless stories of chance meetings and life-changing encounters. Little did Greer know that she was about to become part of that legacy. Her life was a carefully orchestrated ballet of responsibilities. Morning classes in international relations, afternoon shifts at the cafe, evening study sessions that often stretched into the night, and weekend tutorials where she helped younger students master the intricacies of political theory. Every dollar earned went toward her tuition, her small apartment rent, or her mother's medical bills back home in Minnesota. She had mastered the art of stretching every penny, finding beauty in the simplicity of her hard-working life. That Tuesday afternoon seemed ordinary enough. The usual stream of caffeine-seeking students and professors filled the cafe with a comfortable buzz of conversation and the rich aroma of freshly ground coffee beans. Greer moved with practiced efficiency, her genuine smile never wavering as she crafted drink after drink. Her colleagues often marveled at her ability to remember regular customers' orders and personal details, a trait that made her the cafe's unofficial favorite. The autumn sun was beginning its descent, painting the Colorado sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. When the bell above the door chimed, the sudden hush that fell over the cafe drew Greer's attention from the latte she was preparing. In walked a man whose presence seemed to command the very air around him. Sheikh Lutfi al-Rahman moved with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to turning heads, though his expression held none of the arrogance one might expect from a person of his status. He was dressed casually, designer casual, Greer's fashion-conscious co-worker would later point out, in dark jeans and a charcoal-grey cashmere sweater that did little to hide his athletic build. His dark eyes, holding depths of intelligence and something akin to melancholy, scanned the menu board with genuine interest. A few whispers rippled through the cafe. Some students recognized him from business magazines or social media, where his family's vast wealth and influence were frequent topics of discussion. Greer found herself straightening unconsciously, smoothing her apron with suddenly nervous hands. There was something about him that transcended his obvious wealth, a sort of lonely sovereignty that made her heart twist unexpectedly. As he approached the counter, she noticed the slight shadows under his eyes, the way his shoulders carried an invisible weight. "Good afternoon," he greeted her, his accent adding a rich texture to the simple words. "I've heard wonderful things about your coffee." Greer smiled, warmth flooding her cheeks at the gentle kindness in his voice. "Welcome to the grind. What can I make for you today?" "I trust your recommendation," he replied, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. whatever you consider your specialty." As Greer began crafting what she considered the cafe's perfect drink, a modified cortado with a hint of cardamom, a spice she'd noticed was popular in Middle Eastern coffee, she couldn't help but steal glances at him. He stood patiently, observing the cafe's atmosphere with genuine interest, occasionally nodding politely to star-struck students who recognized him. The moment of truth came when he reached for his wallet to pay. The flash of panic across his features was so brief that anyone else might have missed it, but Greer caught it, along with the slight flush of embarrassment that followed. He patted his pockets, then closed his eyes briefly in resignation. "I seem to have forgotten my wallet," he admitted, the words clearly costing him some pride. "I apologize for wasting your time. I'll have to return another day." Without hesitation, Greer reached for her own worn wallet beneath the counter. "Please, let me take care of it," she offered, swiping her card before he could protest. "It happens to everyone." The look he gave her then would stay with her forever, surprise melting into something deeper, more profound. In a world where people regularly tried to curry favor with him through grand gestures and expensive gifts, this simple act of genuine kindness caught him completely off guard. "I insist on repaying you," he said, his voice carrying a note of genuine distress at being indebted to someone who clearly worked hard for her money. "Please, at least let me know your name." "Greer Waverley," she replied, sliding the carefully crafted drink across the counter. "And really, it's nothing. Consider it bolder hospitality." He picked up the cup, his fingers brushing hers for the briefest moment. "I'm Lutfi," he said simply, choosing to omit his titles and family name. "And this isn't nothing, Greer Waverley. Kindness freely given never is." As he took his first sip, his eyes widened in pleasant surprise. "Cardamom," he noted, a genuine smile transforming his entire face. "A taste of home in Colorado. You're full of surprises." Greer felt her heart flutter at his smile, but maintained her professional composure. "I hope you enjoy it. Maybe next time you'll remember your wallet," she teased gently, surprising herself with her boldness. His laugh was unexpected and genuine, drawing more attention from the cafe's patrons. "Indeed. Though I wonder if forgetting it today wasn't somehow meant to be." With a slight bow of his head, he turned to leave, but not before casting one last glance at her over his shoulder. The rest of her shift passed in a blur of orders and cleaning tasks, but her mind kept returning to those few minutes of connection. It wasn't just his obvious attractiveness or the intrigue of his status. It was the glimpse of humanity she'd seen beneath the polished exterior, the way his eyes had lit up at her small gesture of kindness. As she locked up the cafe that evening, the autumn wind had grown cooler, carrying the promise of winter on its breath. Greer pulled her worn jacket tighter around her shoulders, her thoughts still lingering on the unexpected encounter. She couldn't have known then that this ordinary Tuesday would mark the beginning of an extraordinary journey, one that would test her heart, challenge her beliefs, and ultimately show her the true meaning of both love and justice. Walking home under the star-studded Colorado sky, she found herself hoping she'd see him again, while simultaneously chiding herself for such fanciful thoughts. After all, what could a struggling student and a billionaire sheikh possibly have in common? But fate, she would learn, had its own plans, plans that would interweave their lives in ways neither of them could have predicted. The cardamom-spiced coffee that had impressed him so much had been an intuitive choice, one of many small decisions that would come to shape their shared destiny. As she climbed the stairs to her modest apartment, Greer couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had shifted in her world. The practical part of her mind dismissed these thoughts as romantic nonsense, but her heart held onto the memory of his smile, the gentle accent that had wrapped around her name, and the brief touch of their fingers across the counter. That night, as she sat at her small desk reviewing her international relations notes, the word Habibi caught her eye in a text about Middle Eastern customs. She silently mouthed the word, wondering about its meaning, unaware that it would soon become the most significant word in her vocabulary, first as a whispered endearment, then as a cry of heartbreak, and finally as a declaration of triumph. The autumn wind continued to blow through the Boulder campus, carrying with it the scent of possibilities. In her tiny apartment, Greer Waverly finally drifted off to sleep, her dreams filled with dark eyes and the lingering aroma of cardamom-spiced coffee. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new customers, new tests to study for. But something had fundamentally changed in her world. The simple act of kindness she had shown would set in motion a chain of events that would transform not only her life, but also challenge the very foundations of privilege, love, and justice. In the penthouse apartment across town, Sheikh Lutfi al-Rahman stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, holding a cup of coffee that somehow didn't taste quite as good as the one he'd had that afternoon. His thoughts kept returning to the gentle smile of a cafe barista who had shown him more genuine kindness in one moment than he'd experienced in years of navigating his high-stakes world. The forgotten wallet, he knew, had been no accident. His driver had tried to remind him as he left the car, but something, perhaps fate itself, had made him wave off the reminder and walk into that cafe anyway. Little did either of them know that their story was just beginning, a tale that would span continents, challenge cultural boundaries, and ultimately prove that true love, like justice, knows no borders. The wheels of destiny had been set in motion in a humble campus cafe, where a simple act of kindness had cracked the foundations of a carefully constructed world of privilege and power. Chapter 2. Breaking Down Walls. The following weeks painted autumn into winter across the Boulder campus, each day bringing with it the possibility of another encounter. Lutfi became a regular at the grind, his visits timed perfectly with Greer's shifts, a coincidence too precise to be accidental. The other baristas quickly learned to direct him to her counter, sharing knowing smiles behind their coffee machines. His attempts to repay her for that first coffee became something of a daily dance between them. Each morning brought a new creative approach, a delivery of fresh pastries for the entire cafe staff, an envelope of cash that she firmly returned, even a charitable donation to the university's scholarship fund in her name. But Greer remained steadfast, her integrity a wall that both frustrated and fascinated him. "You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met," he told her one quiet afternoon, leaning against the counter during a rare lull in customers. The winter sun caught the silver threads in his charcoal sweater, and Greer found herself wondering if he owned an entire collection in various shades of grey. "And you're the most persistent man," she countered, wiping down the already spotless counter to keep her hands busy. "Most people would have given up by now." "I'm not most people," he replied, his dark eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "And you're certainly not most people either, Greer Waverly." She noticed how he always said her full name, as if tasting each syllable. It made her shiver in a way that had nothing to do with the Colorado winter seeping through the cafe's windows. The cafe had become their sanctuary, a neutral ground where the prince and the pauper could meet as equals. Lutfi found himself sharing stories of his childhood in Dubai. Tales of desert nights under endless stars, of traditional celebrations that filled entire streets with joy, and of the weight of expectations that came with his family name. In return, Greer told him about growing up in Minnesota, about her mother's ongoing battle with multiple sclerosis and her dreams of making a difference in international diplomacy. "My father says America makes people forget their roots," Lutfi confessed one day, watching her craft his now customary cardamom coffee. "He fears I'm becoming too Western." "And what do you think?" Greer asked, carefully adding the spice that had become their private signature. I think... He paused, accepting the cup with a gentle brush of fingers that had become familiar, yet still electrifying. I think roots are meant to grow deeper, not hold us back. As December painted the campus white with snow, their cautious dance of coffee and conversation reached a turning point. Lutfi waited until closing time, watching through the window as Greer moved through her closing routine with practiced efficiency. When she stepped out into the crisp evening air, he was there, a respectful distance away. Would you have dinner with me? The question hung in the air between them, carried on clouds of visible breath in the cold. Just as friends, he added quickly, seeing her hesitation. I know a place that makes incredible naif. Greer pulled her worn coat tighter, studying him. In the glow of the street lamps, with snowflakes catching in his dark hair, he looked almost vulnerable. But years of warnings echoed in her mind. Cultural differences, religious expectations, stories she'd heard about Arab men and Western women. I've heard things, she began carefully, watching his expression, about Arab men, that they're not, that they don't. She trailed off, embarrassed by her own prejudices. That we don't value women? That we're disloyal? There was no anger in his voice, only a deep sadness that made her heart ache. That we see Western women as temporary amusements? She nodded, shame coloring her cheeks. I'm sorry, I shouldn't... No, he interrupted gently. Never apologize for being honest. These stereotypes exist because some have made them true. But Greer, he stepped closer, snow crunching under his Italian leather shoes. Let me prove them wrong. Give me a chance to show you who I really am, not what you've heard I should be. Something in his voice, in the earnest vulnerability of his expression, made her walls begin to crumble. Before she could stop herself, the word slipped out, one she'd been practicing in private, researching its meaning and significance. Okay, Habibi, she said softly, testing the weight of the endearment on her tongue. His sharp intake of breath told her the impact of that simple word. In his eyes, she saw surprise melt into something warmer, more dangerous to her carefully guarded heart. You know what that means? He asked, his voice rougher than usual. I've been studying, she admitted, suddenly shy. International relations major. Remember? Understanding other cultures is kind of my thing. His laugh was warm enough to melt the snow around them. You continue to surprise me, Greer Waverley. Though I should warn you, using that word, it's like opening a door that's not easily closed. Maybe some doors shouldn't be closed, she replied, surprising herself with her boldness. They ended up at a small Middle Eastern restaurant tucked away in a quiet corner of Boulder. The owner, an elderly Lebanese woman, took one look at them and declared them meant to be, serving them course after course of traditional dishes while regaling them with stories of her own cross-cultural romance decades ago. As they shared bites of nafe, its sweetness matching the warmth in Lutfi's eyes when he watched her enjoy the dessert, Greer felt the last of her walls beginning to crack. He told her about his life in the UAE, about the delicate balance between tradition and progress, about his dreams of using his family's wealth to make real change in the world. My father sees only the bottom line, he explained, absently drawing patterns in the condensation on his water glass. But I believe wealth carries responsibility, a duty to improve lives, not just profit margins. That's why you donated to the scholarship fund, Greer realized, pieces clicking into place. Partly, he admitted with a small smile, though I confess trying to impress you was a significant motivator. The evening ended with a chaste but lingering kiss on her cheek, his lips warm against her snow-cooled skin. Shukran, he whispered, teaching her another word. Thank you for giving me a chance. As she watched him drive away in his luxury car, Greer touched her cheek where his kiss still burned. She knew she was stepping onto a path that could either lead to something extraordinary or break her heart completely. What she didn't know was that both possibilities were true. That night, in her small apartment, she looked up more Arabic phrases, learning words that would become both blessings and weapons in the years to come. Across town, in his penthouse, Lutfi stood at his windows, watching the snowfall and thinking of honey gold hair and the courage it took to break down walls, both others and your own. The word Habibi echoed in both their minds as they drifted off to sleep, neither knowing it would become the thread that would both bind them together and mark their eventual unraveling. For now, it was simply a bridge between their worlds, a tender token of trust being built word by word, smile by smile, moment by precious moment. Winter settled deeper over Boulder, but in their hearts, spring was just beginning to bloom. The walls between their worlds hadn't fallen completely, but they had begun to crack, letting in streams of light that would either illuminate a path forward or blind them to the dangers ahead. Only time would tell which outcome would prevail, but for now they existed in that magical space where anything seemed possible, even a love story that defied all expectations and boundaries. Chapter 3. Two Worlds. Colliding. Spring arrived in Boulder like a watercolor painting, washing the world in delicate cherry blossoms and the tender green of new leaves. For Greer and Lutfi, their relationship blossomed just as naturally, defying expectations, with the quiet persistence of wildflowers breaking through concrete. Lutfi's world opened before Greer like pages in an elaborate storybook. His penthouse apartment, occupying the top floor of Boulder's most prestigious building, took her breath away on her first visit. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the Flatirons, their majestic silhouettes painted gold by the setting sun. The space was a masterpiece of modern luxury, tempered with traditional Middle Eastern elements, hand-woven Persian carpets, softening Italian marble floors, ancient Arabic calligraphy art hanging beside contemporary pieces. "This view," Greer breathed, pressing her palm against the cool glass. "It's like touching the sky." Lutfi watched her from the kitchen where he was preparing Arabic coffee, a skill he'd insisted on mastering himself rather than relying on staff. "The view isn't complete without you in it, Habibi," he said softly, the endearment now flowing naturally between them. She turned to him, a teasing smile playing on her lips. "Smooth talker. Did they teach you? And that in Sheikh school?" His laugh echoed through the space as he carried the ornate coffee pot and tiny cups to the low table. "Actually, I learned it from American movies, but the sentiment is genuine." They settled on floor cushions, Lutfi showing her the proper way to accept and drink the coffee. "3 cups," he explained, pouring the first. "One for hospitality, one for enjoyment, and one for the sword." "The sword?" Greer asked, carefully holding the delicate cup as he'd shown her. "An old Bedouin tradition. The 3rd cup means you're under the host's protection." His eyes held hers as she sipped. "Though I suspect you're more capable of protecting yourself than most." Indeed, Greer's independence had become both a source of admiration and gentle frustration for Lutfi. She steadfastly refused his offers to pay her tuition or rent, maintaining her cafe job despite his protests that she should focus solely on her studies. Her tiny apartment, with its mismatched furniture and walls covered in Polaroid photos, became their favorite retreat, a place where titles and expectations fell away. One rainy Sunday morning, as they lay tangled in her worn sheets, thunder rolling distantly over the mountains, Lutfi traced the line of her shoulder with gentle fingers. "Move in with me," he whispered against her skin. "Let me give you the life you deserve." Greer rolled over to face him, her honey gold hair spread across the pillow like sunrise. "I have the life I deserve, Habibi, one I've built myself." She touched his face softly. "Besides, Your world isn't ready for us to live together. The gossip alone would reach Dubai before breakfast. He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. Let them gossip. You're worth any scandal. But they both knew it wasn't that simple. The weight of cultural expectations hung between them like an invisible curtain, present even in their most intimate moments. Lutfi's family, though loosely aware of his American friend, maintained a careful distance that spoke volumes about their expectations for his future. Still, they created their own world within these constraints. Lutfi learned to navigate grocery stores with childlike wonder, insisting on cooking traditional Emirati dishes in Gria's tiny kitchen. More often than not, these attempts ended with them laughing over takeout, the smoke detector their most frequent dinner guest. "You're terrible at this," Gria giggled one evening, watching him attempt to flip a pancake. The batter had somehow ended up on the ceiling. "I'm a quick learner," he protested, pulling her close despite her playful struggles. "And you love me anyway." The words hung in the air between them, neither having used that particular term before. Gria felt her heart skip as Lutfi's body tensed, clearly realizing what he'd said. "Yes," she said simply, turning in his arms to face him. "I do love you, even with your questionable cooking skills." The joy that blazed across his face made him look younger, unburdened. "I love you too, Habibi, more than I ever thought possible." Their worlds continued to merge in unexpected ways. Lutfi found himself addicted to the simple pleasures of American college life: late-night study sessions in 24-hour diners, impromptu road trips to nearby towns, and lazy Sundays spent in sweats watching Netflix. Gria, in turn, learned to navigate the complexities of his world, mastering the subtle art of international business etiquette and the nuances of Middle Eastern social customs. Yet, it was in the quiet moments that their love grew strongest. Lutfi would often find Gria studying Arabic on her phone during breaks at the cafe, her determination to understand his culture touching him deeply. She discovered his secret passion for photography, his phone filled with candid shots of her in various moments, laughing over coffee, lost in study, sleeping peacefully in morning light. Their different backgrounds sometimes led to amusing cultural misunderstandings. During one of their road trips, they stopped at a small-town diner where the elderly waitress, upon hearing Lutfi's accent, spent the entire meal trying to save his soul. Rather than being offended, he engaged her in a thoughtful discussion about faith and tolerance that ended with her insisting on treating them to pie. "You have a gift," Gria observed as they drove away, the taste of cherry pie still sweet on their lips. "You make people want to be better versions of themselves." Lutfi glanced at her, the setting sun painting her profile in gold. "You did that for me first, Habibi. You showed me a world beyond balance sheets and boardrooms." As spring deepened into summer, their love story became something of a campus legend. Students whispered about the billionaire Sheikh who could be found studying in the library with his girlfriend or helping her close up the cafe on late nights. Professors noted how Gria's insights in international relations classes had deepened, influenced by her first-hand experience with cross-cultural relationship dynamics. But it wasn't all fairy tales and romantic gestures. Reality would occasionally intrude in sharp, uncomfortable ways. Like the evening they encountered one of Lutfi's business associates at a high-end restaurant who looked straight through Gria as if she were invisible. Or the whispered comments Gria sometimes overheard about gold diggers and temporary arrangements. After one particularly trying dinner with some of Lutfi's colleagues, they escaped to their favorite spot, a secluded viewpoint overlooking the city. Gria leaned against his car, the metal cool against her back in the summer night. "Sometimes I wonder if we're fooling ourselves," she admitted, voicing the fear that occasionally haunted her quiet moments. "Your world and mine, they're so different." Lutfi moved to stand before her, framing her face with his hands. "Look at me, Habibi." His eyes were fierce in the moonlight. "There is no my world or your world anymore. There's just our world, the one we're building together." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Greer's heart stopped, then raced. "Lutfi." "It's not what you think," he said quickly, opening the box to reveal a delicate silver pendant. The Arabic script caught the moonlight, dancing with ancient grace. "It says, 'Strength in love,' because that's what you've taught me, that real love makes us stronger, not weaker." As he fastened the necklace around her neck, his fingers lingering on her skin, Greer felt tears prick at her eyes. "It's beautiful." "Like you," he whispered, drawing her close, inside and out. That night, under a canopy of stars, they made love in the back of his luxury SUV like teenagers, laughing at the absurdity of a billionaire and a barista finding their perfect moment in a parked car. It was a perfect metaphor for their relationship, the unlikely meeting of luxury and simplicity, passion and tenderness, two worlds colliding to create something entirely new. Later, curled together watching the city lights twinkle below, Greer traced the pendant at her throat. "Tell me a secret," she whispered, a game they'd started playing during their long conversations. Lutfi was quiet for a long moment, his fingers playing with her hair. "Sometimes I imagine our future," he finally said. "A house with big windows and a garden where our children can play. You reading them bedtime stories in English while I teach them Arabic. Family dinners that mix hamburgers and hummus." He paused, vulnerability clear in his voice. "Does that scare you?" Greer turned to face him, her heart full of love and hope and just a touch of fear. "No, Habibi. It makes me brave." What they couldn't know then was that bravery would be essential in the years to come, that the pendant would become both a talisman and a reminder of promises made under starlit skies, that their world, so carefully built on love and understanding, would face tests they couldn't imagine. But for now, they were simply two hearts beating as one, their love story writing itself across the bolder sky in stars and promises, in shared breaths and tender touches, in the space between two worlds where magic still existed and anything seemed possible. Chapter 4. Growing Love. Time flowed like honey in the warmth of their love, sweet and golden. As months transformed into years, Greer and Lutfi's relationship deepened into something rare and precious, a love that seemed to defy not just cultural boundaries, but the very laws of nature itself. Their story became woven into the fabric of Boulder's landscape, as familiar as the flatirons standing sentinel over their growing romance. Lutfi had grown accustomed to finding beauty in simplicity, something his privileged upbringing had never taught him. One ordinary Tuesday morning, he watched Greer making breakfast in her tiny kitchen, wearing one of his forgotten dress shirts and humming an old Arabic song he'd taught her. Sunlight streamed through the window, catching the silver pendant that never left her neck, making it dance with ancient promises. "Habibi," she called over her shoulder, not turning from where she was attempting to flip an omelette. "Stop staring and make yourself useful. The coffee's ready." He moved behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and pressing a kiss to the sensitive spot behind her ear. "I'm memorizing this moment," he murmured. "Every detail." She leaned back against him, letting the spatula rest. "What's so special about this moment?" "Everything," he replied simply. "The way the sun makes your hair look like liquid gold. How you've mastered the exact way I like my coffee. The fact that you're wearing my shirt and singing Feroz songs in your American accent. It's perfectly imperfect." Greer turned in his arms, her eyes searching his face. "You're being unusually poetic this morning. What's really on your mind?" Lutfi traced the line of her cheek with gentle fingers. "I had a call with my father last night, after you fell asleep." He felt her tense slightly, but continued. He's concerned about my extended stay in America, about the direction of my life. You mean about me, Greer said softly, no accusation in her voice, just understanding. About what you represent, he corrected. Change, independence, a future different from the one he's planned since my birth. He tightened his hold on her. But he doesn't understand that you don't represent the loss of my culture. You enhance it. You make me see it through new eyes. The omelette began to smoke behind them, forgotten in the intensity of the moment. Greer quickly turned to rescue it, but it was beyond salvation. They ended up sharing dry cereal on her small balcony, their legs tangled together on the single chair, watching the morning unfold over the campus. Tell me what you want, Greer said suddenly, playing with the spoon in her empty bowl. Not what your father wants, not what duty demands. What does Lutfi want? He was quiet for so long that she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. I want mornings like this, forever. I want to build something meaningful with my family's resources, not just accumulate more wealth. I want to see the world through your eyes, where kindness is currency and love knows no borders. He took her hand, pressing it against his heart. I want you, Habibi. Everything else is negotiable. Tears sparkled in Greer's eyes, but she blinked them away with a watery laugh. Even if I never learn to make a proper omelette, even then, he smiled, kissing her knuckles. Though perhaps we should hire a chef when we... He stopped abruptly, realizing what he'd been about to say. When we what? Greer prompted, her heart racing. Lutfi took a deep breath, turning to face her fully. When we build our life together, properly, permanently. The word hung between them like a star, bright with possibility and terrifying in its implications. They both knew the challenges such a future would bring, the cultural clashes, the family expectations, the social pressures. But in that moment, on a tiny balcony in Boulder, anything seemed possible. Their days fell into a rhythm that blended their worlds seamlessly. Lutfi learned to appreciate the meditative quality of folding laundry, the satisfaction of cooking simple meals together, the joy of grocery shopping on Sunday mornings. Greer discovered the nuances of international business through his conference calls, learned to navigate the complex waters of Middle Eastern politics, and mastered the art of silent support when the weight of his responsibilities pressed heavily on his shoulders. One evening, as they walked through Pearl Street Mall, snow beginning to fall in gentle flurries, Lutfi stopped suddenly. "Dance with me," he said, pulling her close despite her startled laugh. "There's no music," she protested, even as she moved into his arms. "There's always music with you," he replied, humming an old Arabic love song as they swayed together, oblivious to the curious glances of passers-by. In that moment, they were just two souls in love, their different worlds forgotten in the magic of falling snow and shared breaths. But reality had a way of intruding on even their most perfect moments. A flash went off nearby, someone taking a photo of the romantic scene. Lutfi stiffened, his security training kicking in as he quickly turned Greer away from the camera. The spell was broken, their bubble of privacy punctured by the reminder that their love story wasn't just their own anymore. Later that night, curled together in his penthouse, Greer traced patterns on his chest as he slept. She thought about the photo, about how their private moments could become public property in an instant, about how the world seemed determined to remind them that their love was somehow extraordinary, unusual, worth commenting on. "I can hear you thinking," Lutfi murmured, not opening his eyes. "Just wondering," she replied softly, "if love is supposed to be this complicated." He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "The best things in life usually are, Habibi." Their love continued to grow in unexpected ways. Lutfi found himself attending potluck dinners with Greer's fellow students, engaging in passionate discussions about global politics and social justice until the early hours of the morning. Greer began taking advanced Arabic classes, determined to bridge the language gap when they visited his family. The pendant he'd given her became a symbol of their journey, traditional Arabic script carrying a modern message of love, transcending boundaries. Like them, it was a perfect blend of old and new, east and west, tradition and progress. Their shared calendar filled with a mix of commitments that reflected their merged lives, charity galas where Greer's intelligence and grace won over even the most skeptical socialites, late-night study sessions where Lutfi brought coffee and moral support, weekend trips to small mountain towns where they could pretend to be just another couple in love. But beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect romance, subtle pressures were building. Each phone call from Dubai carried unspoken expectations. Each family event Lutfi attended alone left unasked questions hanging in the air. Each time Greer was excluded from an important business function, the reason always carefully diplomatic but clear in its implication. One night, after a particularly elaborate charity event where Greer had been introduced simply as Lutfi's friend for the 100th time, she stood at his window, staring out at the city lights. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman transformed by love, more confident, more sophisticated, yet still unmistakably herself. "What are you thinking?" Lutfi asked, coming to stand behind her, his reflection joining hers in the window. "That love isn't always enough," she said quietly, then felt him tense. "But sometimes," she turned to face him, touching his cheek, "sometimes it's everything." He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "You're everything, Habibi. Don't ever doubt that." As they stood there, holding each other against the backdrop of Boulder's twinkling lights, neither could have known that their love would soon be tested in ways they couldn't imagine. That the strength they'd built together would face challenges that would shake their foundation to its core. That the word Habibi, spoken so tenderly between them, would one day carry the weight of both their greatest joy and their deepest pain. For now, they were simply two hearts beating in perfect sync, their love a beacon in the night, a testament to the possibility that sometimes, just sometimes, love really could conquer all. The pendant at Greer's throat caught the city lights, its Arabic script seeming to pulse with the rhythm of their shared heartbeat, spelling out promises that would soon be tested in the crucible of reality. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new pressures, new tests of their commitment. But tonight, in the safety of their embrace, tomorrow seemed very far away indeed. Their love story continued to write itself across the Colorado sky, each star a witness to their defiance of convention, each shared breath, a promise that some loves are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. Chapter 5. Shadows of Doubt. 7 years into their love story, change crept in like shadow across sundial, subtle at first but impossible to ignore. The signs were there for those who knew where to look. Lutfi's increasingly frequent trips to Dubai, the growing spaces between his calls, the way his eyes would sometimes drift to distant horizons during their conversations. But love has a way of blinding us to what we don't want to see. And Greer's heart was still full of trust and dreams. The bolder spring had painted the world in wildflowers and promise when the first waves of nausea hit. Greer initially dismissed it as stress. Her final semester of graduate school was demanding enough without worrying about her health. But as morning after morning found her hugging her bathroom toilet, reality began to whisper its truth. "You need to see a doctor," Sarah, her closest friend at the cafe, insisted one afternoon as Greer pressed a cool cloth to her forehead in the back room. "This isn't just stress." The medical center was quiet that Tuesday morning. sunlight streaming through large windows into the waiting room where Greer sat, absently touching the silver pendant that still hung at her throat. 7 years of love captured in Arabic script. Strength in love. She wondered if Lutfi had known somehow that they would need that strength. "Ms. Waverley?" The nurse's voice was kind. "The doctor will see you now." The examination room was cool and impersonal, its beige walls having witnessed countless moments of life-changing news. Dr. Martinez's smile was gentle as she delivered the results. "Congratulations," she said warmly. "You're about 8 weeks pregnant." The world seemed to tilt on its axis, colors becoming brighter, sounds sharper. Greer's hand flew to her stomach, where new life was growing, a perfect blend of east and west, of 2 worlds colliding in the most beautiful way possible. I need to be sure," she managed to say. "Can we do another test?" 3 tests later, there was no doubt. Greer walked out of the medical center in a daze, her mind racing with possibilities. She imagined telling Lutfi, seeing his face light up with joy, planning their future together. Their child would have his dark eyes, her smile, their shared stubbornness. They would raise them to be a bridge between cultures, proof that love truly knows no borders. But reaching Lutfi had become an exercise in patience lately. His latest trip to Dubai had stretched from 1 week to 3, his calls becoming shorter and less frequent. "Business complications," he'd explained, his voice distant over the international connection. "Family matters that need attention." Still, Greer's heart was full of hope as she booked the next flight to Dubai. This news was too important for a phone call, too precious for the cold distance of technology. She would surprise him at his private farmhouse, the one place in Dubai where they could be truly alone together. The flight was long, hours stretching like years as Greer's mind played through different scenarios of telling him. She practiced the words in Arabic, wanting this moment to bridge their worlds just as their child would. "Habibi," she whispered to herself, drawing curious glances from her seatmate. "We're going to have a baby." Dubai greeted her with its characteristic blast of heat and grandeur. The city rose from the desert like a mirage, all glass and steel reaching for the heavens. Greer had visited before, but always with Lutfi by her side, his presence a shield against the city's overwhelming opulence. Now, alone in a taxi heading toward his farmhouse, she felt small against the backdrop of such wealth and power. The first sign that something was wrong came at the farmhouse gates. Usually quiet and discreet, today they were open wide, luxury cars lined up along the palm-lined driveway. Music drifted on the hot air, traditional Arabic melodies mixed with the sound of celebration. Greer's heart began to race as her taxi approached. Women in elaborate dresses and fine jewelry were gathering in groups, their laughter carrying across the manicured grounds. Men in pristine white dish-dashers stood in clusters. Many faces she recognized from business meetings and social events over the years. She paid the taxi driver and stepped out into the heat, her simple sundress suddenly feeling inadequate among such finery. The pendant at her throat seemed to grow heavier with each step she took toward the main house. Then she saw it. The elaborate decorations, the traditional symbols, the unmistakable signs of an engagement ceremony. Her world, so bright with hope just hours before, began to crack at the edges. A server passed with a tray of drinks, giving her a curious look. She must have seemed out of place, a Western woman alone at a traditional family celebration. But 7 years of loving Lutfi had taught her enough about his culture to understand exactly what she was witnessing. She found him in the garden, surrounded by well-wishers. He was wearing traditional dress, more formally than she'd ever seen him, looking every inch the sheikh he was born to be. At his side stood a young woman in an intricately embroidered gown, her beauty as cultivated as the roses blooming around them. Time seemed to stop as Lutfi's eyes met hers across the crowd. She saw the moment recognition hit, watched as his composed expression cracked for just a second before smoothing over. He excused himself from his guests with practiced grace, moving toward her with purpose. "Why are you here?" His voice was low, urgent, as he gripped her elbow and guided her away from curious eyes. "I told you never to come unannounced." The man before her seemed like a stranger, his familiar features arranged in an expression she'd never seen before. Gone was the Lutfi who danced with her in snowfall, who learned to make breakfast in her tiny kitchen, who whispered "Habibi" against her skin like a prayer. "I have news," Greer managed to say, her voice surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening in her heart. "Important news, Habibi." "Don't!" He cut her off sharply. "Don't call me that. Not here. Not now." "I'm pregnant," she said simply, the words falling between them like stones into still water. The color drained from his face, his grip on her arm tightening painfully. "Impossible," he breathed, but she saw the truth of it register in his eyes. "This can't be happening. Not now." "It is happening," Greer said, her free hand moving protectively to her stomach. "We're going to have a baby." His laugh was harsh, nothing like the warm sound she'd fallen in love with. "No," he said firmly, "we're not. This ends now. I'll pay you. Name your price. $100,000, $200,000, whatever you want. Take the money and leave my country." The world seemed to tilt again, but this time there was no joy in the shifting. "And your love?" she asked, her voice small. "Your promises?" "Love?" His smile was cruel, a stranger's expression on her beloved's face. "I spent money on you that you've never seen in your life. We both enjoyed it, but it's over. I'm marrying my business partner's daughter, and I won't let you ruin everything I've built." "Lutfi, please." "Enough!" His voice was sharp as a blade. "If you don't leave, I'll file a harassment case against you. You know what happens to Western women in Dubai's jails. They disappear forever. Take the money and go." He released her arm abruptly, turning back toward the celebration as if she were already gone, already forgotten. Greer stood frozen, one hand on her arm where his fingers had left marks, the other still protecting the tiny life within her. The pendant at her throat seemed to burn now, its message of strength in love transformed into bitter irony. Tears blurred her vision as she walked away, her steps unsteady on the manicured grass. Behind her, the sounds of celebration continued, but to her ears, it had transformed into a funeral dirge. In the taxi back to the airport, Greer finally let her tears fall. Her hand found the pendant, fingers tracing the familiar script. With a sudden motion, she yanked it free, breaking the chain. 7 years of love, of trust, of dreams, all shattered in a single afternoon under the merciless Dubai sun. But as her tears dried in the artificial cool of the taxi's air conditioning, something else began to stir in her heart. Beyond the pain, past the betrayal, a new strength was taking root. She thought of the life growing inside her, a child who would need her to be stronger than she'd ever been. "Habibi," she whispered, but this time she was talking to her unborn child. "We'll be okay. We'll show him what real strength looks like." The Dubai skyline receded behind her, its glittering towers no longer seeming magical but threatening, like beautiful snakes ready to strike. In her hand, the broken pendant caught the light one last time before she slipped it into her pocket, a reminder of promises made and broken, and of the strength she would need for the battle ahead. She didn't know it then, but this ending was really a beginning. The death of a fairy tale would give birth to something far more powerful, a story of justice, of resilience, and of a mother's love that would shake the foundations of privilege and power to their core. Chapter 6. The Betrayal's Echo. The return flight from Dubai to Colorado stretched like an endless ribbon of pain across continents and time zones. Greer sat rigid in her economy seat, her body present but her mind replaying the afternoon's events in an excruciating loop. The broken pendant lay heavy in her pocket, its weight a constant reminder of shattered dreams and promises turned to dust. First-class passengers filed past her, and for a moment she caught a whiff of expensive oud perfume, the same kind Lutfi wore. The scent sent her rushing to the tiny airplane bathroom, where morning sickness mixed with heartbreak, until she wasn't sure which was making her more ill. A kind flight attendant knocked softly on the door. "Miss, are you all right? Would you like some ginger ale?" Greer caught her reflection in the small mirror. Pale face, red-rimmed eyes, hair escaping from what had been a neat bun. 7 years of love had just evaporated in the Dubai heat, but the evidence of that love was growing inside her, undeniable and precious despite its father's rejection. "I'm okay," she managed, though they both knew it was a lie. Just a bit of air sickness. Back in her seat, she pulled out her phone, opening the gallery of photos she hadn't had the strength to delete. There they were, countless moments of what she'd thought was love. Lutfi teaching her to make Arabic coffee, both of them laughing as the pot boiled over. Their first snow together, his wonder at the falling flakes captured in perfect digital clarity. Quiet mornings in her tiny apartment, where a billionaire sheikh had seemed perfectly content with mismatched mugs and second-hand furniture. "When did the lies begin?" she whispered to his smiling image. "Was any of it real, Habibi?" The endearment caught in her throat like broken glass. How many times had she whispered that word in love? How many times had he responded with what she now knew were carefully crafted lies? The plane touched down in Denver as dawn was breaking over the Rockies. The mountains stood solid and unchanging, their ancient faces indifferent to human dramas playing out beneath them. Greer gathered her minimal luggage. She'd packed so lightly, expecting to return with joy rather than devastation, and made her way through the quiet terminal. Her apartment, when she finally reached it, felt like a museum of lost love. Everything held memories. The coffee machine Lutfi had insisted on buying her, claiming her old one was an insult to good beans. The oversized armchair where they'd spent countless evenings, her studying while he handled international calls. Even her bedsheets still held a trace of his cologne from his last visit before everything fell apart. Greer moved through the space like a ghost, touching objects that had meant something just days ago. Now each item seemed to mock her with memories of a future that would never be. She reached her small bathroom just in time for another wave of morning sickness to hit. As she knelt on the cool tile floor, one hand pressed against her still flat stomach, her phone buzzed with an incoming message. Her heart leaped traitorously, hoping against hope it was Lutfi coming to his senses. Instead, it was an email from his lawyer, a detailed non-disclosure agreement, and an offer of $5 million in exchange for her silence and the termination of her pregnancy. The clinical language of the document struck her like physical blows. Hereby agrees to terminate the alleged pregnancy. Will maintain complete confidentiality regarding the prior relationship. Acknowledges this settlement as full and final resolution. Greer's hand shook as she scrolled through the document, each word adding to the weight in her chest. The number of zeros in the offered amount was staggering, more money than she'd ever imagined possessing. It would set her up for life, erase her student loans, provide the kind of security she'd always worked so hard to achieve. All it would cost was her baby, her dignity, her truth. Something shifted inside her then, like tectonic plates realigning after an earthquake. The tears dried on her cheeks as a new emotion began to take root. Rage. Pure, clarifying rage. She thought of all the times Lutfi had spoken about honor, about dignity, about doing what was right rather than what was easy. How many times had she watched him make charitable donations with grand gestures, playing the role of the benevolent sheikh, bringing light to the world? And now here he was, trying to buy her silence, trying to erase not just their love, but the life they'd created together. "No," she said aloud, her voice stronger than she expected. "No more." She stood up, catching her reflection in the bathroom mirror again. The woman who looked back at her was changed. Something harder in her eyes, something unbreakable in the set of her jaw. She touched her stomach gently. "Listen to me, little one," she whispered. "Your father thinks he can make us disappear with his money and his power. But he's about to learn something about real strength." Moving with purpose now, Greer began to gather evidence. Every photo, every message, every gift and card and scrap of proof that their relationship had been real. 7 years of memories transformed into ammunition. She reached out to friends who had witnessed their relationship, colleagues who had seen them together at events, professors who had observed their interactions on campus. Her hands moved to the chain around her neck, finding it bare. The pendant still lay in her pocket, broken, but its message remained true, if transformed. Strength in love. Not romantic love anymore, but the fierce, protective love of a mother for her child. The next few days passed in a blur of appointments. Her regular doctor to confirm the pregnancy's progress, then a carefully chosen lawyer specializing in international custody cases. Sarah from the cafe brought her ginger tea and crackers, sitting with her through bouts of morning sickness and bouts of tears that had nothing to do with hormones. "He really thought I would just take the money and disappear," Greer said one evening, curled up in the armchair she now intended to replace, as if 7 years of love could be erased with a big enough check. Sarah squeezed her hand. "Men like him are used to buying their way out of problems, but you're not a problem, Greer. You're a force of nature." More emails arrived from Lutfi's lawyers, each offering more money, each threat slightly less veiled. They spoke of international complications, of cultural considerations, of the damage to reputations and business relationships. Greer forwarded each one to her own lawyer without reading them fully, her focus now entirely on protecting her child's future. Late one night, unable to sleep, she finally took out the broken pendant. The Arabic script caught the moonlight streaming through her window, and for a moment she was transported back to the night Lutfi had given it to her. How genuine his love had seemed then, how real his promises had felt. With steady hands, she placed the pendant in a small evidence bag, labeling it carefully with the date it was given and the promises it had represented. It would join the rest of her documentation, proof not just of their relationship, but of the systematic way it had been ended. "You wanted to buy my silence, Habibi," she whispered to the darkness, the old endearment now sharp as a blade. "But some things aren't for sale. Some things are worth fighting for." She placed a hand on her stomach, feeling the first stirrings of the warrior she would need to become. The next few months would test her in ways she'd never imagined, but she was ready. The naive girl who had fallen in love with a sheikh was gone, replaced by a woman who understood that true strength often comes disguised as heartbreak. Outside her window, the Colorado night stretched vast and star-filled, the same sky that arched over Dubai, where Lutfi probably slept peacefully, believing his money and power would solve this inconvenience as it had solved all others in his life. But he had underestimated her, had forgotten that love, even betrayed love, could be transformed into something powerful. The mother of his child was not going to disappear quietly. She would not be bought or threatened into submission. She would fight with everything she had, not for revenge, but for justice. Not just for herself, but for the child who deserved to be acknowledged, to be valued, to be loved. Dawn was breaking over the mountains when Greer finally fell asleep, one hand still protectively curved over her stomach. In her dreams, she stood tall and unafraid, facing down not just Lutfi but everything he represented: wealth, privilege, the assumption that money could buy anything and anyone. She would show him, show them all, that some things remained beyond price, that some betrayals could become fuel for transformation, that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from wielding power, but from standing up to it. The broken pendant lay in its evidence bag, no longer a symbol of love, but a testament to promises broken and strength found in the breaking. The Arabic script still spelled out its message, but its meaning had changed. Strength not in love, but in truth, in justice, in the fierce determination of a mother protecting her child. The battle lines were drawn, though Lutfi didn't know it yet. In trying to buy her silence, he had instead awakened something far more dangerous, a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. Chapter 7. The Fall and Rise. Summer bled into autumn, and as the Colorado leaves turned to gold and crimson, Greer's body changed with its own shifting seasons. Her pregnancy became more visible with each passing day, her gentle curve a defiant testament to love betrayed but life persisting. The morning sickness that had first revealed her condition gave way to a different kind of strength, one born of necessity and nurtured by determination. The legal offices of Morrison and Chang occupied the 15th floor of a downtown Denver high-rise, its windows offering panoramic views of the mountains that had witnessed her love story's rise and fall. Catherine Chang, a formidable attorney known for handling international custody cases, sat across from Greer, reviewing the latest correspondence from Lutfi's legal team. "They've increased their offer to $10 million, Catherine said, her voice neutral but her eyes sharp behind designer frames. "Tax-free, with immediate transfer to any account of your choosing." Greer's hand moved instinctively to her growing belly. At 16 weeks, she had recently learned she was carrying a girl. "They still want me to terminate. That's their primary condition, yes, along with complete silence about your relationship with Sheikh al-Rahman." Catherine paused, studying her client carefully. "Greer, I need to be clear. This is life-changing money, the kind of security most people only dream about." A bitter laugh escaped Greer's lips. "Security? I had security, Catherine. I had love, trust, 7 years of building a life together. Look how secure that turned out to be." She stood, moving to the window. Below, the city bustled with afternoon activity, people rushing through their lives unaware of the dramas playing out in the offices above. Her reflection showed a woman transformed, gone were the soft sweaters and casual jeans of her barista days, replaced by a crisp maternity dress and subtle makeup. She had learned that in this battle, appearance was another form of armor. "Do you know what he used to call me?" she asked, not turning from the window. "Habibi. It means my love in Arabic. He would whisper it like a prayer, like something precious." Her hand traced the ghost of the pendant she no longer wore. "Now he wants to buy my silence with blood money, to erase not just me but our child, as if love could be cancelled with a large enough check." Catherine set down the papers, moving to stand beside her client. "Then let's make him understand exactly what he's dealing with. You've kept every piece of evidence from your relationship." "Everything." Greer turned, steel in her voice. "Every photo, every message, every gift. The apartment is still exactly as it was when he last visited. His clothes in the drawer, his favorite coffee in the kitchen, his handwritten notes on my refrigerator. 7 years of proof that this wasn't some casual affair he can sweep under a Persian rug." The lawyer nodded approvingly. "Good. And the pendant?" "In a safety deposit box, along with the most important documents. I had everything authenticated by a notary." A small, fierce smile crossed Greer's face. I learned something about protecting assets from watching him all these years. The next few hours were spent building their case. Catherine's team had been thorough, constructing a timeline of the relationship that would be impossible to dismiss as trivial. There were witnesses, professors who had seen them together on campus, cafe regulars who had watched their love story unfold over countless cups of coffee, even some of Lutfi's own business associates who had seen them at social functions. They'll try to paint you as a gold digger, Catherine warned, reviewing their strategy. A clever American girl who seduced a wealthy foreign businessman. Let them try. Greer's voice was calm, but her eyes flashed. I worked every day of our relationship, kept my own apartment, paid my own bills. I have 7 years of bank statements proving I never took a penny from him beyond small gifts. She touched her stomach gently. This child wasn't conceived for profit. She was created in love, whether her father chooses to acknowledge that or not. As if in response to her mother's words, the baby chose that moment to move, a flutter like butterfly wings, beneath Greer's heart. The sensation brought tears to her eyes, not of sadness this time, but of fierce joy. This was what she was fighting for, this miraculous life that was half her, half him, all possibility. Catherine, she said suddenly, I want to make a counteroffer. The lawyer raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. Tell them I don't want his millions. I don't want his properties or his investments or anything else they've tried to bribe me with. She straightened, channeling every lesson in poise she'd learned from watching Lutfi in business meetings. All I want is for him to acknowledge his child, to give her his name, her rightful heritage, and a father's love. That's my only price. Catherine made notes, but her expression was concerned. You understand what you're giving up? The kind of life that money could provide for your child? I understand exactly what I'm choosing. Greer's voice was firm. Money without honor is worthless. Lutfi taught me that, ironically enough. I want my daughter to know that her mother fought not for wealth, but for dignity, for truth. Later that evening, in her apartment, Greer went through her nightly ritual of documenting her pregnancy. Each day was photographed, each doctor's appointment recorded, each milestone carefully preserved. She spoke to her daughter in both English and Arabic, determined that the child would know both sides of her heritage, even if one parent had rejected her. Your father thinks power comes from wealth, Habibi, she whispered, using the endearment now only for her child. But real power, that comes from standing up for what's right, no matter the cost. The nursery was taking shape in what had been her home office. The walls were painted a soft sea green, neither pink nor blue, but the color of new growth of possibility. She had chosen furniture carefully, modestly, no elaborate crystal cribs or golden rattles. Everything was selected with love and purpose, paid for with her own savings. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Her heart jumped traitorously before logic reminded her that Lutfi was half a world away, probably planning his wedding to the perfect bride his family had chosen. Opening the door revealed Sarah, arms laden with takeout bags. Thought you might be hungry, her friend said, sweeping in with the scent of warm bread and spices. I got that Indian food the baby's been craving. They settled on floor cushions, another habit learned from Lutfi that Greer couldn't bring herself to break, and spread out the feast. Sarah watched her friend eat with approval. The early days of constant nausea were behind them, replaced by a healthy appetite that matched Greer's growing strength. I turned down his money today, Greer said between bites of naan. All of it. Sarah paused, samosa halfway to her mouth. The millions. Every penny. Greer met her friend's shocked gaze steadily. This isn't about money. It never was. Then what is it about? Justice, truth, teaching my daughter that some things can't be bought. Greer's hand found her belly again, a gesture that had become automatic. Lutfi once told me that in his culture honor is everything. Well, he's about to learn that lesson again from the woman he thought he could silence with a checkbook. Sarah reached across the food to squeeze her friend's hand. You're the strongest person I know, you realize that? Greer's smile was soft, but determined. I'm learning to be. Every day, every challenge, every kick from this little one. It's all making me stronger. That night, after Sarah left, Greer stood at her window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere across the ocean, Lutfi was probably in his Dubai palace, surrounded by wealth and privilege, believing his problems solved by the power of his money. He had forgotten the most important lesson of their time together, that true love, like true strength, grows in the most unexpected places. She opened her journal, adding another entry to the chronicle she was keeping for her daughter. Today, Habibi, I chose dignity over wealth. Your father offered millions to make us disappear, but he doesn't understand that some things are priceless. You are not a problem to be solved with money. You are a miracle, a testament to love that was real, even if it ended in betrayal. And I promise you this, you will grow up knowing that your worth isn't measured in dollars or dirhams, but in the strength of your character and the truth in your heart. The autumn wind whispered through Boulder's trees, carrying the scent of change. In her growing belly, her daughter moved again, as if affirming her mother's words. Greer touched the space where her pendant used to hang, feeling not loss now, but purpose. The battle ahead would be difficult, but she was ready. The naive girl who had fallen in love with a sheikh was gone, replaced by a warrior mother who understood that sometimes the greatest act of love is fighting for justice, no matter the odds. Chapter 8. Rising from the Ashes. Winter descended on Colorado with a fierce beauty that matched Greer's growing determination. As December painted Boulder in white, she watched her body transform with the passing weeks, her daughter growing stronger within her. The nursery, once just an empty room filled with hopes, now held everything needed to welcome new life, except a father's love. On a snowy Wednesday morning, as the first light of dawn barely touched the mountains, Greer's water broke. Sarah, who had been staying with her in the final weeks, sprang into action with practiced efficiency. They had rehearsed this moment, planned for every detail, but nothing could have prepared Greer for the intensity of actual labor. "Breathe, Habibi," she whispered to herself between contractions, the Arabic endearment now a talisman of strength rather than a reminder of loss. "We're doing this together." The delivery room at Boulder Community Hospital became a battlefield of a different kind. For 18 hours, Greer fought the most primal fight of her life. The medical team watched in amazement as she refused pain medication, channeling every contraction into purpose. "Your body knows what to do," her midwife assured her. "Trust in your strength." In those long hours, as her body worked to bring new life into the world, Greer's mind drifted through memories. She remembered the first time Lutfi had smiled at her over a coffee counter, the way his eyes had crinkled at the corners. She thought of quiet mornings in her apartment, his voice soft as he taught her Arabic phrases. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine him here, holding her hand, witnessing the miracle they had created together. But reality was different. Sarah's steady presence anchored her through each wave of pain, each moment of doubt. And when the final push brought her daughter into the world, it was Catherine Chang's number saved on speed dial, not Lutfi's. "Congratulations," the doctor announced, placing a squirming bundle on Greer's chest. "You have a beautiful baby girl." The world stopped. Everything Greer had ever known about love reorganized itself around this tiny being, this perfect blend of East and West. Maya opened her eyes, Lutfi's eyes, dark and intense, and gazed up at her mother with ancient wisdom. "Marhaban, Habibi," Greer whispered, tears falling freely. "Welcome to the world, Maya." She had chosen the name carefully, Maya, meaning water in Arabic, symbol of life and strength. Like water, her daughter would find her way through any obstacle, adapt to any challenge, carry the power to both nurture and reshape the world around her. The next few days passed in a blur of first moments. Maya's first bath, first feeding, first quiet coos in the pre-dawn darkness. Greer documented everything meticulously, photos, videos, detailed notes, not just for the legal battle ahead, but for her daughter, so she would know every precious moment of her early life had been celebrated, even if half her heritage remained in denial. Catherine visited on the third day, bringing not flowers but updates on their case. "The DNA test can be done as soon as you're ready," she said, watching Maya sleep peacefully in her hospital bassinet. "It'll be the foundation of our legal strategy." Greer nodded, her eyes never leaving her daughter's face. "Look at her, Catherine. How can anyone deny she's his? She has his eyes, his chin." She traced Maya's perfect features with a gentle finger. "She's a miracle he's chosen to reject." "Not for long," Catherine promised. "We're building an ironclad case. Your documentation of the pregnancy, the relationship evidence, witness statements, it's comprehensive, and once we have the DNA results, he'll have no choice but to acknowledge her. He'll have no legal ground to deny her existence or her rights." When they finally returned home, Greer found her apartment transformed. Sarah and other friends had filled the space with warmth. Soft blankets, gentle lighting, a refrigerator stocked with nourishing meals. But it was the wall of photographs that brought fresh tears to her eyes. They had created a timeline, 7 years of love captured in images. Greer and Lutfi in various seasons, various countries, various moments of joy. The final photo showed Greer pregnant, radiant despite her circumstances, one hand protectively over her belly. Below it hung an empty frame, waiting for Maya's first portrait. "Your father should be here," Greer told her daughter as they settled into the nursing chair. "He should be counting your fingers and toes, learning the different cries that mean hunger or discomfort, or just wanting to be held. He should be singing you Arabic lullabies and telling you stories about your ancestors." Maya's only response was to nurse contentedly, her tiny hand curled around her mother's finger. In that gesture, Greer found new resolve. This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about heritage, identity, a child's right to know both halves of herself. The DNA test results arrived 2 weeks later, confirming what was visible in every line of Maya's face. She was undeniably Lutfi al-Rahman's daughter. Catherine immediately began the process of filing their case, while Greer focused on documenting every milestone of Maya's early life. She hired a professional photographer to capture Maya's first month, ensuring every image was dated and authenticated. She kept a detailed journal, recording not just events, but feelings, memories, the echoes of love that had created this precious life. Everything was preserved, protected, prepared for the battle ahead. "Your father thinks power comes from money and influence," she told Maya during their midnight feedings. "But real power? That comes from truth, Habibi, from love, from the courage to stand up for what's right." As Maya grew stronger, so did Greer's determination. She returned to work part-time at the cafe, not from financial necessity. Her savings were careful and sufficient, but to maintain the independence that had always been central to her character. Her regular customers celebrated Maya's arrival, and the cafe became a second home for both mother and daughter. One morning, as Greer was preparing for her shift, she caught her reflection in the mirror. The woman who looked back at her was changed. Motherhood had given her a new kind of beauty, a fierce grace that no designer clothes or expensive jewelry could match. She touched the space where Lutfi's pendant used to hang, feeling not emptiness now, but possibility. The legal paperwork continued to build. Catherine's team gathered depositions from witnesses to their relationship, collected financial records showing Greer's independence, and prepared documentation of Maya's existence and heritage. Each piece of evidence was another stone in the foundation of their case, another step toward justice. Lutfi's lawyers continued their attempts at negotiation, each offer higher than the last, but Greer remained unmoved. "My daughter's heritage isn't for sale," she told Catherine firmly. "Her identity isn't negotiable." As winter mellowed into spring, Maya began to show more of her father's features alongside her mother's spirit. She was a quiet baby, observant and determined, with a smile that could illuminate the darkest room. Greer captured every moment, building a digital library of evidence that would be impossible to dismiss. "One day," she promised Maya, "you'll understand why we fought this battle, why we chose dignity over wealth, truth over convenience. Your father may have forgotten the meaning of honor, but we will remind him." The broken pendant lay in its evidence bag, no longer a symbol of lost love, but a testament to promises that would be enforced through justice rather than emotion. The Arabic script still spelled out strength in love, but now it represented a different kind of strength. The power of a mother's love, the unyielding force of truth against privilege. Spring flowers began to bloom in Boulder, and with them Greer's case grew stronger. Each day brought them closer to the confrontation that would shake the foundations of Lutfi's carefully constructed world. He had underestimated her once, dismissed her as a problem that could be solved with money. Soon he would learn that some forces cannot be bought or threatened into submission. Maya thrived, unaware of the storm gathering around her existence. Her laughter filled the apartment that had once echoed with her father's voice, her presence healing wounds he had left behind. She was living proof that love, even betrayed love, could create something beautiful and unstoppable. "We're ready," Greer told Catherine during their final preparation meeting. Maya slept peacefully in her carrier, her dark lashes casting shadows on her perfect cheeks. "It's time to show Sheikh Lutfi al-Rahman exactly what kind of woman he tried to a." "Silence," the lawyer nodded, understanding in her eyes. "He won't know what hit him." "Oh, he will," Greer corrected softly, running a gentle finger along Maya's cheek. "He'll know exactly what hit him. Truth, justice, and the strength of a mother's love. Some things are beyond the reach of even billions." Chapter 9. The battle begins. The summons arrived at Lutfi's New York office on a bright spring morning, served with the precise timing Catherine Chang was famous for. She had waited until he was on American soil for an important business merger, a moment when he couldn't simply retreat behind Dubai's protective borders. The legal documents, thick with evidence and allegations, landed like a bomb in his carefully ordered world. Lutfi sat in his corner office, Manhattan's skyline spreading before him like a kingdom of glass and steel. His hands, usually steady enough to sign billion-dollar contracts without hesitation, trembled slightly as he read through the papers. DNA test results, relationship documentation, financial records, 7 years of love transformed into legal ammunition. His phone buzzed. Yasmin, his fiancée, calling from Dubai. He let it go to voicemail. They hadn't spoken much since his hasty departure for New York. Her questions about his sudden business trip met with vague explanations. Now he wondered how long he could keep this new crisis from her, from his family, from the business partners who had celebrated his engagement just months ago. "Sheikh al-Rahman?" His assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Your lawyers are here." The team of high-powered attorneys filed into his office, their expressions grave. They spread documents across his mahogany desk, talking in rapid-fire legal terms about jurisdictions and precedents. But Lutfi's eyes kept returning to one particular photo included in the court filing, Maya, barely a month old, her dark eyes mirror images of his own. "She's beautiful," he whispered, unaware he'd spoken aloud until his lead attorney cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Sir, we need to focus on strategy. This Waverley woman, her name is Greer." The words came out sharper than intended. "And you know as well as I do that every word in these documents is true." The lawyers exchanged glances. They had expected denials, demands for countersuits, the usual tactics of wealthy men facing unwanted consequences. This quiet admission caught them off guard. "The DNA results are conclusive," one ventured carefully. "But there are still ways to handle this quietly. We can increase the settlement offer." "She already turned down 10 million, another interjected. "Perhaps if we doubled it—" Lutfi stood abruptly, moving to the window. Below, New York continued its eternal dance of commerce and ambition, oblivious to the drama unfolding above. "She won't take the money," he said softly. "She never cared about money. That was what made her—" He trailed off, lost in memories of a small cafe in Boulder, of genuine kindness offered without expectation of return. "Sir," his lead counsel pressed, "you need to understand the seriousness of this situation. Ms. Waverley has built an incredibly strong case. The evidence of your relationship is comprehensive. The DNA match is irrefutable. And her lawyer, ... Catherine Chang," Lutfi finished. "Yes, I know her reputation." He turned back to face them. "What exactly does she want?" The attorneys shifted uncomfortably. "According to the filing, she's demanding full acknowledgement of the child as your legitimate daughter. Legal recognition, your family name, inheritance rights, everything a firstborn child would be entitled to under both American and UAE law." The word firstborn hit Lutfi like a physical blow. Maya wasn't just his daughter, she was his firstborn child. In his culture, that carried tremendous weight, regardless of the circumstances of her birth or her mother's nationality. "There's more," another lawyer added. "The court has issued a travel restriction. You cannot leave the country until this is resolved." Lutfi sank back into his chair, the full magnitude of his situation finally hitting him. He had thought his wealth and influence would shield him from consequences, that enough money would make this problem disappear. Instead, he found himself trapped in America, faced with irrefutable evidence of his own betrayal. His phone buzzed again, another call from Yasmin. On his desk, Maya's photo seemed to watch him with knowing eyes, his eyes. The gravity of what he had done, what he had tried to deny, pressed down on him with suffocating weight. "I need to make a call," he said quietly, dismissing his legal team with a gesture. They filed out, leaving him alone with his thoughts and the growing realization that his carefully constructed world was about to change forever. With hands that had regained their steadiness, he picked up his phone. Not to return Yasmin's calls, but to dial a number he had deleted. Months ago, yet still knew by heart. It rang twice before her voice answered, as familiar as his own heartbeat. Catherine Chang's office. Greer. He breathed her name like a prayer. No. Her voice was calm but firm. "We have nothing to discuss outside of legal channels, Habibi." The endearment carried none of its former warmth, landing like ice in his veins. "You made your choice in Dubai. Now you'll face the consequences in America." "Please," he started, but she cut him off again. "Our daughter is beautiful, isn't she?" A pause, heavy with meaning. "She has your eyes, the same eyes that once promised me forever, that swore love knew no borders. Remember those promises, Lutfi. Our lawyers can show you the evidence, every word, every gift, every moment you're trying to erase. This isn't your Arab kingdom anymore. This is America, and here justice doesn't bow to wealth or power." Before he could respond, the line went dead. Lutfi stared at his phone, remembering countless conversations with this woman who had once been his entire world. He had thought himself powerful enough to simply write her out of his story. Now she was rewriting the ending, and he was losing control of the narrative. His office felt suddenly claustrophobic, the Manhattan skyline no longer a symbol of power, but a cage of glass and steel. On his desk, Maya's photo caught the afternoon light, her infant face holding questions he wasn't ready to answer. Security cameras caught his exit from the building, his usual confident stride replaced by something less certain. He walked for hours through New York's crowded streets, anonymous among the millions. His mind replayed Greer's words, "This isn't your Arab kingdom anymore." She was right. In Dubai, his word was law, his wealth a shield against consequences. But here, in this concrete maze of American justice, different rules applied. Rules that cared nothing for his title or his bank accounts. Rules that demanded accountability. As dusk fell over the city, Lutfi found himself in a small park, watching families enjoy the spring evening. A father pushed his daughter on a swing, her laughter carrying on the breeze. The simple scene struck him with unexpected force. A future he had rejected out of pride and fear, a connection he had tried to sever with money. His phone buzzed yet again. Yasmin, his father, his lawyers, all demanding answers he no longer had. The carefully constructed facade of his life was cracking, and through those cracks, truth was beginning to seep in. "Ya Allah," he whispered to the darkening sky, using the prayer of his childhood. "What have I done?" In Boulder, at that same moment, Greer held Maya close, breathing in her sweet baby scent. The phone call had shaken her more than she wanted to admit, his voice triggering memories she thought she had buried. But one look at her daughter strengthened her resolve. "Your father is beginning to understand, Habibi," she whispered, using the endearment that now belonged only to Maya. "Some things are beyond the power of money to fix. Some truths cannot be bought or buried." The legal battle had begun, and with it a shift in the balance of power. Lutfi al-Rahman, who had thought himself untouchable, was about to learn that the greatest force in the world wasn't wealth or influence, but the determination of a mother fighting for justice. The broken pendant, still in its evidence bag, caught the last light of day. Its message of strength in love had transformed into something else entirely, a reminder that love, even betrayed, could become a weapon more powerful than all the wealth in Dubai. Night fell over both cities, New York and Boulder, east and west, finding two people whose lives were forever intertwined, now standing on opposite sides of a battle that would test not just the limits of law, but the very foundations of privilege and power. Chapter 10. Truth and Consequences. The Denver federal courthouse rose against the morning sky like a monument to justice, its limestone facade glowing golden in the early light. Inside its marble halls, a story of love, betrayal, and redemption was about to unfold before the eyes of the world. The case of Waverly versus Al-Rahman had drawn international attention, bringing journalists from across the globe to witness the collision of wealth and justice, of East and West. Greer arrived early, Maya secured in her carrier against her mother's chest. The baby, now 6 months old, was dressed in a simple white dress that highlighted her striking resemblance to her father. Catherine Chang walked beside them, her silver briefcase containing 7 years of memories transformed into legal ammunition. "Remember," Catherine said softly as they waited in a private conference room, "stay calm no matter what his team says. They'll try to provoke you, to make you appear emotional or unstable." Greer nodded, gently stroking Maya's dark curls. "They forget that I've had 7 years of practice handling the complexities of his world. I won't break, Catherine, not anymore." The courtroom was already filling when they entered. On one side sat Lutfi's impressive array of lawyers, their suits as expensive as their retainers. On the other, Catherine's smaller but formidable team arranged their documents with precise care. The gallery behind them buzzed with whispered conversations in multiple languages as reporters and spectators settled in. Lutfi entered last, flanked by security. He had lost weight since Dubai, his designer suit hanging slightly loose on his frame. His eyes immediately found Maya, widening slightly at the sight of his daughter. For a moment, his carefully composed expression cracked, revealing something that might have been regret. "All rise," the bailiff called as Judge Eleanor Martinez entered. She was known for her expertise in international family law and her immunity to the influence of wealth or status. Her sharp eyes took in the scene before her, lingering for a moment on Maya's peaceful face. "Be seated," she commanded. "Let's begin." Catherine Chang rose first, her voice clear and controlled. "Your Honor, this case is about more than paternity rights or financial support. It's about accountability, about the fundamental right of a child to know her heritage, and about the responsibility that comes with privilege." She began methodically presenting their evidence. Photos appeared on screens throughout the courtroom, Lutfi and Greer at university events, at charity galas, sharing quiet moments in her apartment. Their relationship unfolded in chronological order, documented with a precision that left no room for denial. "Ms. Waverley," Catherine addressed her client, "please tell the court about the night Sheikh Al-Rahman gave you this pendant." Greer touched the empty space at her throat where the necklace had once rested. "It was a summer night in Boulder. We were at our favorite overlook above the city. Lutfi said it was a symbol of our love, transcending cultural boundaries. The Arabic script reads, 'Strength in love.'" Her voice remained steady as she added, "It's the same pendant he demanded I remove in Dubai, just before he offered to pay me to abort our child." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Lutfi's lead attorney stood to object, but the judge waved him down. "Continue, Ms. Waverley." Over the next several hours, Greer's testimony painted a picture not of a casual affair, but of a deep, meaningful relationship built on mutual respect and understanding. She presented years of bank records proving her financial independence, witness statements from professors and colleagues who had known them as a couple, even recipes she had learned to cook traditional Emirati dishes. "Mr. Al-Rahman taught me his language, his culture, his traditions," she explained. "We weren't just dating. We were building a life together, bridging two worlds." When Catherine presented the DNA results, the evidence was irrefutable. Maya was undeniably Lutfi's daughter, carrying his genetic markers with the same certainty she carried his features. The medical records showed Greer had declined amniocentesis despite her age, unwilling to risk her precious pregnancy even for certainty. During a brief recess, Greer sat in the conference room, nursing Maya. The baby's eyes, so like her father's, watched her mother with ancient wisdom. "You're doing beautifully, Habibi," Greer whispered, the endearment now belonging solely to her daughter. "We both are." The afternoon session brought Lutfi's defense. His lawyers tried to paint Greer as a calculating seductress, a woman who had deliberately trapped their client, but each allegation fell apart under Catherine's precise cross-examination. "Ms. Waverley," Lutfi's lawyer pressed, "isn't it true that you refused multiple settlement offers, including sums that would have set you and your child up for life?" "Yes," Greer replied simply, "because my daughter's heritage isn't for sale. Her identity, her right to know her father, her connection to her culture, these things have no price tag." The pivotal moment came when Catherine called Lutfi himself to testify. He moved to the witness stand with practiced grace, but his usual confidence seemed dimmed. Under the harsh courtroom lights, he looked less like a powerful sheikh and more like a man facing the consequences of his choices. "Sheikh al-Rahman," Catherine began, "please read this message for the court." She presented an enlarged image of a text conversation. Lutfi's voice was barely audible as he read his own words. "Habibi, our love knows no borders. East or west, rich or poor, none of it matters. You've taught me that real wealth isn't in bank accounts, but in the heart's capacity for love. When did you send this message?" 3 weeks before. He paused, swallowing hard. "Before Dubai. Before you offered to pay Ms. Waverley to terminate her pregnancy and disappear." "Objection," his lawyer called. "Overruled," Judge Martinez stated firmly. "Answer the question, Sheikh al-Rahman." Lutfi's eyes found Maya, now sleeping peacefully in her carrier. Something in his expression shifted, as if seeing her, really seeing her for the first time. "Yes," he admitted quietly, "before I betrayed everything I claimed to believe in." A hush fell over the courtroom. Even the reporters stopped writing, caught in the gravity of the moment. In the gallery, Yasmin, who had flown in from Dubai despite her family's objections, pressed a hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Catherine's next questions were relentless, forcing Lutfi to acknowledge each step of his relationship with Greer, each promise made and broken, each attempt to buy his way out of responsibility. With each admission, his carefully constructed defenses crumbled further. "One final question," Catherine said. "Looking at your daughter now, hearing the evidence of your relationship with her mother, what do you have to say for yourself?" Lutfi's lawyers started to object, but he raised a hand to silence them. For a long moment, he stared at his hands, the weight of 7 years of love and betrayal visible in the slope of his shoulders. "I was a coward," he said finally, his voice carrying clearly through the silent courtroom. "I let fear of disappointing my family, fear of challenging cultural expectations, override everything I knew was right. I threw away real love for arranged convenience, and when faced with the consequences of my actions, I tried to buy my way out instead of standing up for who I loved." He looked directly at Greer then, really seeing her for the first time since Dubai. "You were right, Habibi," he said softly, the endearment falling from his lips like a remembered song. "This isn't my kingdom, where money can solve every problem. This is America, where justice still means something." The gallery erupted in whispers. Yasmin stood abruptly and walked out, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. Lutfi's lawyers huddled together, papers rustling frantically as they tried to salvage their case. Judge Martinez called for order, her gavel crack echoing through the chamber. "Given the defendant's admission and the overwhelming evidence presented, I'm prepared to rule on this case. However, I'll first ask Ms. Waverley, what exactly do you want from this court?" Greer stood, Maya now awake and watching the proceedings with curious eyes. "Your Honor, I want my daughter to have what is rightfully hers, her father's name, her cultural heritage, and the knowledge that she was fought for, not for money or position, but for truth and justice." The judge nodded, studying both parents carefully. "Sheikh al-Rahman, do you understand what that means? The responsibilities and obligations that come with legally acknowledging your daughter?" "I do, Your Honor." Lutfi's voice was stronger now, more like the man Greer had fallen in love with. "And I'm ready to face them, without hiding behind wealth or privilege." Judge Martinez's ruling was comprehensive. Full legal recognition of Maya as Lutfi's daughter, substantial child support based on his actual wealth rather than reported income, and mandatory involvement in her life including regular visitation. The ruling would be enforceable in both US and UAE courts, ensuring no international boundaries could interfere with Maya's rights. As the courtroom began to empty, Lutfi approached Greer and Maya. He moved cautiously, like a man approaching a miracle he wasn't sure he deserved to witness. Maya reached for him instinctively, her tiny hands grabbing at her father's perfectly pressed suit. "She knows you," Greer said softly. "I've shown her your pictures every day, told her stories about her father, in both English and Arabic. She knows exactly who you are." Lutfi's eyes filled with tears as Maya grabbed his finger with the strong grip of a child, claiming what was hers by right. "I don't deserve this chance," he whispered. "No," Greer agreed, "but she deserves her father. Don't waste this opportunity, Lutfi. Don't make me regret fighting for her right to know you." In that moment, bathed in the warm afternoon light streaming through the courthouse windows, a new chapter began. Not a fairy tale romance this time, but something perhaps more valuable. A story of justice served, of truth prevailing over power, of love transforming from romance to the fierce protection of a child's birthright. The broken pendant, presented as evidence and now returned to Greer's possession, caught the light from its evidence bag. Its message of strength in love had evolved, like everything else in their story, into something deeper than its original meaning. Love had indeed proven stronger than borders, than wealth, than cultural expectations. Not romantic love, but the profound love of a mother for her child, and perhaps now the awakening love of a father learning to put duty and honor above pride. Chapter 11. Justice Served. The courthouse steps became a stage for the final act of their courtroom drama. Camera flashes exploded like stars as Greer emerged into the afternoon sunlight. Maya secure in her arms, Catherine Chang standing protectively at her side. The world's media had gathered to witness the aftermath of a battle that had shaken the foundations of privilege and power. Lutfi exited shortly after, his security detail struggling to hold back the press. Gone was the arrogant Sheikh who had tried to buy his way out of responsibility. In his place stood a man humbled by justice, his designer suit no longer armor, but a reminder of the privilege that had failed to shield him from consequences. "Sheikh al-Rahman, will you appeal the decision?" reporters called out. "Ms. Waverley, how does it feel to win against a billionaire? What about your engagement in Dubai?" Greer paused at the top of the steps, Maya watching the chaos with curious eyes, her father's eyes. The moment called for words, for a statement that would echo across continents. She turned to face the cameras, her voice clear and strong. "Today, justice proved more powerful than wealth," she declared. "Love may know no borders, but neither does truth. To every woman who's been told to stay silent, to every mother fighting for her child's rights, to everyone who's been made to feel powerless against privilege, this victory is yours too." The headlines would splash across international news within hours. American barista triumphs over billionaire Sheikh. Love, betrayal and justice, the verdict that shook two continents. Dubai dynasty heir forced to acknowledge secret child. Inside the courthouse's private conference room, away from the media circus, another scene unfolded. Yasmin, still wearing her engagement ring, confronted Lutfi for the first time since his testimony. "You lied to me," she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "Not just about her, about everything, about who you really are." "Yasmin, I can explain." "No," she cut him off, twisting the diamond ring from her finger. "You've explained enough on the witness stand." She placed the ring on the table between them. "Some lies can't be undone with money or influence. Remember that." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "She made you face the truth," Yasmin added softly. "That makes her stronger than all your billions." The click of her heels echoed down the marble hallway, marking the end of another chapter in their saga. In another corner of the courthouse, Catherine's team was already preparing the enforcement documents. The judge's ruling was comprehensive. Not only must Lutfi acknowledge Maya as his legitimate daughter, but he would also face severe penalties if he failed to maintain his parental responsibilities. We're filing these simultaneously in US and UAE courts, Catherine explained to Greer. He won't be able to hide behind international borders anymore. His assets, his reputation, his future business dealings, everything depends on his compliance. Greer watched as her lawyer expertly wielded the law like a sword of justice. And the foundation, already in motion, the judge's ruling includes provisions for establishing the Waverly Al-Rahman Foundation for International Family Rights. Funded by his wealth, guided by your experience, it will help other families caught between cultures and jurisdictions. Maya began to fuss, reaching instinctively toward the sound of her father's voice from the hallway. Some bonds, it seemed, transcended even the bitterest battles. Greer adjusted her daughter in her arms, the weight of victory finally settling on her shoulders. "Miss Waverly," a courthouse aide appeared. "Sheikh Al-Rahman requests a moment. Supervised, of course." Greer nodded, following the aide to a small meeting room. Lutfi stood by the window, his silhouette outlined by the afternoon sun. When he turned, the change in him was striking. Gone was the cold mask he'd worn in Dubai, replaced by something raw and real. "She has my eyes," he said softly, watching Maya track his movements. "She has your heart too," Greer replied. "A better version of it, I hope." Maya reached for him again, and this time Greer allowed Lutfi to approach. The moment his daughter's small hand touched his cheek, tears finally broke through his carefully maintained composure. "I'm sorry," he whispered, the words meant for both mother and child. "I forgot who I was supposed to be, who I promised to be when I first met you in that cafe. The man who forgot his wallet." Greer's voice held a hint of their old warmth. "The man who found something more valuable than money." He gently touched Maya's dark curls. "I'll spend the rest of my life making up for what I tried to throw away." Outside, the media waited hungrily for more drama, more conflict. But in that quiet room, something else was taking shape. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. Not love rekindled, but perhaps a different kind of bond forging in the fires of justice served. "Your mother's pendant," Lutfi said suddenly. "The one from the evidence. It should be Maya's now. A reminder of where she comes from and what her mother fought for." Greer touched the empty space at her throat where the necklace had once rested. "And what did I fight for, Lutfi?" "Truth," he answered immediately. "Justice. The right of our daughter to know both her worlds." He paused, meeting her eyes directly. "You fought for everything I should have stood for myself." The afternoon sun painted the room in shades of gold, not unlike the desert light that had witnessed their parting in Dubai. But this time, the light illuminated not an ending, but a beginning. Complicated, challenging, but real. Catherine appeared at the door. "Greer, the press is ready for your formal statement." Reality beckoned, with all its complexities and consequences. Maya would need to be fed soon. Statements would need to be made. Papers would need to be signed. The machinery of justice, having served its purpose, was already turning toward the future. "Your lawyers have the foundation paperwork," Greer said, gathering Maya back into her arms. "Read it carefully. This isn't just about us anymore." Lutfi nodded, straightening his suit as if donning armor for the battles ahead. "I understand. No more running, no more hiding behind wealth or privilege." "No," Greer agreed, her voice firm. "From now on, we face the truth together, not as lovers, but as parents, as partners in something bigger than ourselves." As they prepared to face the waiting world, Maya reached out once more, grabbing both her parents' fingers in her tiny hands. In that gesture lay the future. Not the fairy tale they'd once imagined, but something perhaps more valuable, a story of justice served, of truth prevailing, of love transforming into something stronger than romance. The broken pendant would be restored, not as a symbol of lost love, but as a testament to battles won and lessons learned. It would hang around Maya's neck someday, telling future generations that some things cannot be bought or buried. Truth, justice, and the fierce love of a mother who dared to stand against power itself. The headlines would fade, the media circus would move on to new dramas, but the impact of their story would ripple outward, touching lives across continents, inspiring others to fight for justice against seemingly impossible odds. In the end, love had indeed known no borders, but more importantly, neither had truth, justice, or the courage to stand up for what was right. Epic finale, Legacy of Light. 10 years after justice shook the foundations of power in that Denver courtroom, the Dubai skyline glittered against a desert sunset. The Waverly Al Rahman International Center for Justice rose like a beacon of hope among the city's ambitious architecture, its design a perfect blend of East and West, just like the young girl who now stood at its podium, her father's eyes scanning the assembled crowd with her mother's unwavering determination. Maya Al-Rahman, 11 years old and already a bridge between worlds, addressed the gathering of international dignitaries with the poise of someone born to break boundaries. Behind her, a massive screen displayed images from the Foundation's decade of work. Families reunited, justice served, lives transformed. 10 years ago, my mother taught the world that love knows no borders, Maya began, her voice carrying the same strength that had once challenged a sheikh in an American courtroom. But more importantly, she proved that justice knows no price. In the front row, Greer watched her daughter with fierce pride. The years had added wisdom to her beauty, authority to her grace. The pendant at her throat, restored and transformed, caught the light like a star fallen to earth. Beside her sat Lutfi, no longer the arrogant sheikh who had tried to buy silence, but a man remade by accountability and redemption. They were not lovers. That fairy tale had ended in betrayal and courtroom battles. But they had become something perhaps more valuable. Partners in a revolution of justice, co-creators of a legacy that would outlive them both. The evening marked more than just the Foundation's anniversary. It celebrated a decade of change that had rippled across continents, challenging ancient prejudices and transforming lives. The Waverly Al Rahman case had become a landmark in international family law, cited in courts from London to Singapore. Yasmin, now a prominent advocate for women's rights in the Middle East, sat with her own family. Her daughter and Maya were inseparable friends, another bridge built from the ashes of what could have been bitterness. Catherine Chang, her reputation only magnified by the years, nodded approvingly as Maya continued her speech. This center stands as proof that when truth confronts power, when justice faces privilege, the outcome can transform the world, Maya declared, switching fluidly between English and Arabic. Every story these walls have witnessed began with someone choosing courage over silence, dignity over compromise. The screen behind her showed headlines from their own story, now a decade old. Justice prevails, love knows no borders. Sheikh's empire transformed by American mother's courage. Waverly case changes international family law, but it was the newer headlines that told the true story of their legacy. Waverly Al Rahman Foundation wins Unhuman Rights Award. Landmark legislation protects cross-cultural families. Dubai leads Middle East in progressive family law reform. As Maya spoke, Greer's mind drifted back to that cafe in Boulder where everything began. How far they had come from coffee cups and forgotten wallets, from broken promises and shattered dreams. The journey had cost her a fairy tale, but given her something far more precious, a revolution of justice, a legacy of truth. Lutfi caught her eye, sharing a moment of understanding. They had both been transformed by the crucible of their story. He from a privileged sheikh who thought money could solve everything. She from a barista who dared to challenge an empire. Their love had died, but from its ashes had risen something extraordinary. The ceremony continued as Maya unveiled the center's newest initiative, a global network of legal clinics providing support to cross-cultural families, funded by the very wealth that had once been offered to buy silence. Lutfi's billions, once wielded as weapons of silence, now served as tools of justice. My father taught me that true legacy isn't measured in dirhams or dollars, Maya continued, smiling at Lutfi, but in lives changed, in justice served, in truth honored. And my mother showed me that real power isn't in what you can buy, but in what you dare to fight for. The night air carried the scent of desert roses and possibility as the celebration moved to the center's gardens. Here, under stars that had witnessed countless stories of love and loss, of justice and redemption, families from across the globe shared their own tales of transformation. A young woman from Singapore tearfully thanked Greer for inspiring her own fight for justice. A businessman from London spoke of how the foundation had helped him reconcile his children's mixed heritage. A judge from Cairo described how the Waverley case had influenced his own groundbreaking rulings. Later, in a quiet moment, Greer found herself in the center's heritage room. Here, protected in a place of honor, lay the original broken pendant, now a symbol not of lost love, but of truth's triumph over power. Beside it, photographs told their story: the cafe in Boulder, the courtroom in Denver, the first day of the foundation. "Mama," Maya's voice called softly. She joined her mother, now nearly as tall, her features a perfect blend of East and West. "Tell me again about the day you decided to fight." Greer touched her daughter's cheek, seeing in her face all the borders that love and justice had crossed. "I fought because some things are beyond price, Habibi, because truth demands courage, because love, even when it ends, can give birth to justice." Lutfi approached, maintaining the respectful distance they had learned to navigate over the years. "And because sometimes," he added, "the greatest legacy comes not from what we keep, but from what we dare to change." The Dubai night sparkled beyond the windows, stars and city lights merging into a constellation of possibility. In the garden below, voices murmured in dozens of languages, sharing stories of battles won and justice served. The Waverley Al Rahman Center stood as a testament not just to one family's story, but to the power of truth to transform the world. Maya's pendant, a gift on her 10th birthday, caught the light, matching her mother's. The Arabic script still spelled out strength in love, but its meaning had evolved into something far greater than romance. It spoke now of the love that drives us to fight for justice, the strength that transforms personal pain into universal change. The broken pendant that had once symbolized shattered promises now represented something far more powerful. The moment when love transcended borders, not through romance, but through the pursuit of justice. Its pieces, carefully preserved, told a story not of what was lost, but of what was found: courage, truth, and the power to change the world. As the celebration continued below, 3 generations of Al Rahman women, Lutfi's mother, Greer, and Maya, stood together, their shadows merging into one. They were living proof that some legacies transcend blood and borders, that some victories echo through generations, that some loves transform not into happily ever after, but into something far more precious, a light of justice that would shine for generations to come. "Habibi," Maya whispered, using the word that had once carried so much pain, now transformed by innocence and hope. "We're just beginning, aren't we?" "Yes," Greer answered, drawing her daughter close. "Every story of justice creates ripples, and our ripples have become waves." She shared a knowing look with Lutfi. "Sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about romance at all. They're about courage," Lutfi added quietly. "About daring to face truth, no matter the cost." "About justice," Maya concluded, wise beyond her years. which truly knows no borders. The night air carried their words up to the stars, the same stars that had witnessed their beginning in a Colorado cafe, their breaking in a Dubai garden, their triumph in a Denver courtroom. But now these celestial witnesses looked down on something greater than a love story. They watched over a legacy of justice, a testament to truth, and a promise that some lights, once kindled, never die. They only grow stronger, illuminating the path for others to follow. The broken pendant in its display case caught the starlight, its fractured surface reflecting not what was lost, but what was gained. A victory not just for one family, but for all who dared to believe that justice could triumph over power, that truth could prevail over privilege, that love, transformed by courage, could change the world. And in that moment, under a desert sky that held both stars and promises, their story stood complete. Not a fairy tale of romance, but an epic of justice served, of truth honored, of love transformed into a legacy that would light the way for generations to come.